The euphoric lemming wasn't euphoric. It wasn't even particularly lemming-like, unless one counted its propensity for dramatic self-endangerment. But it was a ship, and Captain Fizwick, sporting a grin that suggested a man with a death wish or merely too many screws loose, was its reluctant master. Fizwick woke up to the sound of alarms, which was normal. The abnormal part was the quiet that followed. Usually when the lemming screamed, something exploded, someone swore, and a fire demanded his immediate attention. Today it was just silence. Ominous, peaceful silence. "Well, isn't that a bitch?" Fizwick muttered, scratching his head like it owed him money. He kicked the side of his bunk, prompting it to whir open and deposit him unceremoniously onto the cold metal floor. The lemming had gone from its usual cacophony of chaos to unnervingly serene, never a good sign. Stumbling down the corridor, he met Char, the ship's engineer, who had the distinct look of someone who hadn't slept or bathed in about as long as Fizwick had been ignoring ship malfunctions. Char was fiddling with a holographic console, the screen flickering like a drunk trying to find its way home. "Morning, Char." "Or whatever time it is. What's going on?" Char snorted, a sound like a clogged vacuum cleaner. "Oh, you know, the usual. Systems are dead, we're mysteriously frozen in orbit, and the coffee machine's broken again. So basically, we're screwed." "Frozen in orbit, you say?" Fizwick raised an eyebrow, trying and failing to look surprised. "Sounds like a typical Tuesday." "Yep," Char replied, giving the console a smack. It promptly exploded in a shower of sparks. "And that's the least of our problems. I've got a feeling something's poking around inside the systems. Something. Alien," Fizwick winced. "Alien, like the time you claimed your socks were possessed." Char glared. "Those socks moved by themselves, I swear, but I mean not us alien. We've got unauthorized access signals, code fragments that look like they were written by a drunk octopus." Fizwick nodded as if he understood a word of what Char was saying. "Right, drunk octopus code, my favorite. So do we have a plan, or are we just going to sit here and enjoy the view?" "Well, we could try turning things on and off again," Char suggested, scratching at a grease stain on her cheek. "Or, panic." "I'm leaning towards panic." Fizwick shrugged. "Let's see what the rest of the misfits have to say. Maybe someone's got a bright idea, or at least a bottle of something strong." They made their way to the bridge, where the rest of the crew had assembled. If assembled was the right word for a bunch of disinterested miscreants who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else but here. There was Vec, the pilot, currently engrossed in a game of Galactic Solitaire on her console. Her hair was a bright pink, a shade that could only be achieved by a serious disregard for aesthetic restraint. "Vec, any insights, or are you just going to keep losing at solitaire?" Fizwick asked, plopping into the captain's chair with the grace of a collapsing building. Vec didn't even look up. "We're stuck, Cap. Frozen around a planet that's not on any map I've ever seen. Also, solitaire is rigged." "Right," Fizwick said, rubbing his temples. "Anyone else have thoughts? Points to the first person who can convince me we aren't royally screwed." A wiry figure stepped forward, chewing on the end of a pen. It was Drax, the ship's security officer, who had the unsettling habit of treating every conversation as if it were an interrogation. "Well," Drax drawled, "if it's aliens, maybe they just want to chat, or dissect us. Who knows? Either way, not much we can do unless we can reboot the systems and figure out what they want." Fizwick contemplated this. "Great, so option A, chat with aliens. Option B, get dissected. What a lovely spread of choices." Drax grinned, a predator's smile. "Could be worse, Cap, we could be out of booze." Fizwick chuckled darkly. "True, true. All right, Char, how do we reboot without exploding something vital?" Char sighed as if she were explaining calculus to a particularly dim child. "We need to manually override the locks on the control circuits. The alien interference is jamming the automatic systems." "And where might one find these circuits?" Fizwick asked, fully expecting the answer to be somewhere inconvenient. "Down in maintenance." "With the rats," Char replied, confirming his suspicion. Fizwick stood up with a groan. "Right off to the bowels of the ship we go. Vec, Drax, you're with me. Char, see what else you can figure out up here." The trio descended into the ship's underbelly, a place of dark corners and ominous creaks. Fizwick led the way, flashlight in hand, casting long shadows that danced like mocking specters. "You know," Vex said, peering into the darkness, "if I was an alien, I'd hide down here." "Just saying. If you were an alien, we'd have spaced you ages ago," Drax retorted, eyes scanning the gloom. Fizwick snorted. "With our luck, the aliens are probably invisible and allergic to sarcasm. That'd be a twist." They reached the maintenance bay, a room filled with dust, debris, and the occasional suspicious skittering. "Well, this looks inviting," Fizwick said, eyeing the mess. "I think something just looked back at me," Vex said, shuddering. Drax drew a weapon, more out of habit than necessity. "All right, let's get this over with." Char said something about pry bars and manual overrides. Fizwick nodded, locating a rusty metal panel that looked like it hadn't been opened in a century. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, wedging the bar into the seam. With a creak of protest, the panel swung open, revealing a tangle of circuits and wires that made Fizwick's head spin just looking at them. "Right," he said. "Anyone know what we're doing here?" Vec and Drax exchanged glances. "Not a clue," Vec admitted, "but I'm sure Char will walk us through it." Fizwick tapped his earpiece. "Char, we're at the panel. What now?" Char's voice crackled through the static. "All right, you're looking for the big red button. Can't miss it. Unless you're colorblind, in which case good luck." Fizwick squinted into the panel. "Big red button. Ah, here we go." "Now press it," Char instructed. "Gently if you can manage." Fizwick pressed the button, wincing at the expected explosion. Instead, there was a hum of energy, a flicker of lights, and the ship shuddered as systems rebooted. "Well, that's a relief," Drax said, holstering his weapon. Char's voice came back triumphant. "We're back online mostly, still some interference, but it's better." Fizwick exhaled. "Good, now what about our alien pals? Any signs of them?" "Still picking up the signals," Char replied. "But they are changing, adapting maybe." "Adapting," Fizwick repeated. "Lovely." As they climbed back to the bridge, the lights flickered, and an unfamiliar voice crackled over the intercom. It was cold, mechanical, and definitely not human. "Greetings, inhabitants of the vessel. Surrender your systems and you may yet survive." "Well, shit," Fizwick thought. "Looks like option A is off the table," he said to his crew. "Time for plan B, survive and maybe take out a few of these bastards while we're at it." Vec cracked her knuckles. "Sounds like fun." Drax nodded, a wicked gleam in his eye. "I've been itching for a fight." Fizwick grinned, feeling alive for the first time that day. "All right, crew. Let's show these aliens what it means to mess with the euphoric lemming." With that, they braced themselves for the coming storm, ready to face whatever cosmic nightmare had decided to pick a fight with the wrong ship. And Fizwick, for all his cynicism, felt a swell of something almost like hope, or maybe it was just the anticipation of a really good scrap. Either way, he was ready. "Bring it," he muttered, as the ship shuddered and the alien threat loomed ever closer. "Let's see what you've got." The euphoric lemming trembled slightly as it regained partial power, systems flickering back to life like a Frankenstein monster in a horror vid. Captain Fizwick stood in the center of the bridge, hands on hips, surveying his motley crew with the air of a man who'd just been told he had a terminal hangover. "So," he said, with a grin that bordered on irrational, "anyone else get the feeling we're about to be the punchline to a cosmic joke?" "Only every damn day," Char piped up through the intercom, her voice crackling with the static of the half-fried comms system. "And today, the joke's on us. Have you heard the latest? Something wants to turn us into data collections. Like some kind of interstellar Pokémon card set." "Digga humans," Vex said, rolling the phrase around like it was a bad taste in her mouth. "Sounds like a new cult." Drax crossed his arms, leaning against a console with the dangerous grace of a man who could break a neck for a living and do it well. "Could be worse. They could want to eat us." Fizwick raised a hand. "Let's not give them ideas, all right." "So what's the plan, team?" "Well," Char interrupted, "the alien signals are getting stronger. They're adapting, getting closer. I say we get them on the line. Maybe they'll tell us what they want." Drax's laughter was humorless. "Yeah, and maybe they're looking for new friends. How many heads do they have, you think? Fizwick shrugged, a futile gesture that seemed to encompass the futility of not just their situation, but existence itself. Guess we'll find out soon enough. The ship lurched, lights dimming ominously, and the intercom whined like a dying animal. A holographic screen blinked into life, and there stood the envoy, a gelatinous creature of shifting colors and unsettling symmetry, or lack thereof. Greetings, it burbled through what must have been some kind of translator. I am Glorpox, envoy of the digitizers. We offer you eternity as data, free from the burdens of flesh. Fizwick exchanged glances with his crew. Glorpox, my friend, he began, adopting the kind of tone one might use with a troublesome in-law. Love the sales pitch, but I'm not sure becoming intergalactic homework is my idea of a good time. Glorpox wobbled, a ripple passing through its amorphous form. The data preservation is an honor. Your species will live forever in our archives. Forever in a filing cabinet, Vec muttered. Sounds delightful. Fizwick leaned forward. See, Glorpox, my crew and I, we're more of the live fast, die occasionally, and maybe explode in a blaze of glory types. What's in it for us if we don't go along with your little plan? The alien envoy seemed to consider this, its form shifting as if rearranging its thoughts. Refusal leads to digitization by force. Compliance ensures a dignified transfer. Ah, well, when you put it that way, Fizwick replied, scratching his chin, I'm still not convinced. How about we negotiate? Glorpox's form shimmered again, the equivalent of an alien sigh, perhaps. Negotiate? Yeah, Fizwick said brightly. You know, what if we offered you something better than data, like? I don't know the recipe for the perfect banana de query. Char snorted over the comms, clearly eavesdropping with interest. You trade our lives for booze, why not? Fizwick shot back. Seems like a fair trade to me. The alien continued without missing a beat. Your humor is noted, but humor is not data. Your compliance is non-negotiable. Fizwick grinned, feeling that familiar thrill of a challenge brewing. All right, Glorpox, give us a moment to consider your generous offer. Char, ideas. Char's voice crackled over the intercom, full of static and sarcasm. Well, we could stall them, buy time to figure out how their tech works. Maybe Vec can charm them with her solitaire skills. Hey, Vec protested. That game is rigged. Fizwick waved off her complaint. Drax, any thoughts on charming our gooey friend here? Drax shrugged, the motion as deadly as a rattlesnake coiling for a strike. If charming fails, I suggest a more kinetic approach. Fizwick turned back to the screen. Glorpox, buddy, could we maybe get a demonstration of this digitizing business? You know, for scientific curiosity. The alien envoy rippled, considering. A demonstration can be arranged. We shall digitize a non-essential part of your vessel. Non-essential, Fizwick repeated, shooting a look at Char. What do we have that's non-essential? Char's voice came through with a hint of glee. How about the coffee machine? It's broken anyway. Fizwick nodded sagely. Yes, Glorpox, digitize our coffee machine. A machine of great cultural significance among our people. The envoy seemed to accept this, and there was a flash of light. Suddenly, the coffee machine vanished, leaving behind only a faint scent of burnt grounds and disappointment. Digitization complete, Glorpox announced. Fizwick clapped his hands. Well, that was anticlimactic, but informative. Let's consider this for a moment, shall we? The transmission ended, leaving the crew in silence once more. Fizwick turned to his crew, the grin never leaving his face. All right, we need a plan, ideas. Vec leaned back in her chair, feet propped up on the console. Could we maybe upload some kind of virus? If they love data so much, let's give him a nasty one. Drax stood straighter, interested. A digital Trojan horse, I like it. Char's voice buzzed over the line, thoughtful. If we could patch into their systems, maybe we can overload them with something, spam them to death. We'll need access to their mainframe, Vec noted, eyes narrowed in concentration. And I bet it's not just lying around unguarded. Fizwick nodded. We'll need to make them trust us. Play nice at least until we're in. Or, you know, we could just shoot our way through, Drax offered, ever the pragmatist. Fizwick chuckled. Let's keep that as plan B, shall we? Char, can you rig us something virulent, like a computer virus with a mean streak? Char replied, already sounding like she was knee-deep in code. On it. Fizwick turned back to the holoscreen, activating the comms. Glorpox, we've decided to take you up on your offer, but we have some conditions. The alien reappeared, jiggling with what might have been anticipation. State your conditions and we shall evaluate. Fizwick crossed his arms, trying to look serious. We're gonna need a face-to-face. You know, make sure this is all legit. Maybe over a nice interstellar video conference. Glorpox shifted in what might have been confusion. Our presence aboard would facilitate the process. We shall send an envoy. Fizwick's grin widened. Perfect. Let's roll out the welcome mat. Moments later, the air shimmered and a portion of the deck glowed with a faint light. There appeared Glorpox in all its gelatinous splendor, more colorful and unsettling up close. Welcome aboard, Fizwick said, gesturing grandly. Mind the mess, we don't get visitors often. Glorpox surveyed the surroundings with what might have been disdain. This vessel is primitive. Hey now, Fizwick replied, mock-offended. We prefer retro, so Glorpox, care to show us the ropes of this digitizing business. The envoy pulsated, possibly in a show of pride. The process is simple. Your consciousness is transferred to a digital state and your material form is dismantled. Dismantled, you say? Fizwick feigned a shudder. Sounds a bit like a bad breakup. Vex snickered while Drax simply watched, ever the silent sentinel. Char's voice buzzed through the intercom. Fizwick, we've got the virus ready. Just say the word. Fizwick met Glorpox's gaze, or the closest thing to an eye that the alien had. So, Glorpox, before we go through with this, can we see your setup? You know, a behind-the-scenes tour. Glorpox hesitated, its form undulating. Our processing unit is classified. Fizwick spread his hands in a placating gesture. Come on, Glorpox. You're about to make us immortal. At least let us see where we'll be spending eternity. There was a long pause during which Fizwick could almost hear the cogs, or whatever passed for cogs, turning in the alien's mind. Finally, Glorpox relented. We shall grant you access, but only to observe. Fizwick nodded, trying hard not to look too eager. Great. Lead the way. The alien motioned and the air shimmered again, forming a portal of sorts. Glorpox entered, its form disappearing into the glow. Fizwick turned to his crew. Char, Drax, you're with me. Vec, hold the fort. Vec waved a hand dismissively. Yeah, just don't get us all turned into space files. Fizwick, Char, and Drax stepped through the portal, entering a space that was both vast and confining, filled with the hum of alien technology and the glow of ethereal screens. Glorpox gestured toward a massive terminal at the center. This is our central processing unit. Here, you will become data. Char nudged Fizwick, whispering, I can plant the virus from here. Just keep it distracted. Fizwick turned his attention back to Glorpox, mustering every ounce of charm he had. So, Glorpox, how'd a nice blob like you end up digitizing the galaxy? While he kept the envoy occupied, Char quickly interfaced with the terminal, fingers flying over an alien console like a pianist on a caffeine high. Drax stood by, ever the bodyguard, watching for any signs of trouble. Our mission is to preserve, Glorpox intoned, its voice carrying the weight of cosmic duty. To ensure all species survive in some form. And your form, Fizwick mused, ever tried being a solid? I hear it's all the rage in some parts. Glorpox seemed to consider this, its form rippling. Our state is optimal for our functions. Fizwick nodded sagely. Ah, I see, function over fashion. Char gave him a subtle nod indicating she had deployed the virus. Fizwick's heart raced. Now comes the fun part. So, Glorpox, he said, turning the charm dial up to 11, how about a toast to new beginnings? The alien envoy pulsed, perhaps in confusion. A toast? Fizwick threw an arm around Glorpox, or attempted to, his arm sinking into the gelatinous form. Yeah, a toast. To our future as the universe's newest data entries. May we be the most obnoxious files you've ever had. The virus began its work, unseen tendrils of code worming through the alien systems, wreaking havoc. Lights flickered and Glorpox's form jittered erratically. "What is happening?" Glorpox demanded, a hint of panic in its voice. Fizwick stepped back, grinning like a jackal. "Looks like you've got a bug in the system, Glorpox. Maybe you should have upgraded your antivirus." The alien's colors shifted chaotically as its system struggled against Char's digital chaos. It was a sight to behold, an alien intelligence brought low by human ingenuity and a good sense of humor. Amidst the chaos, Drax leaned over to Fizwick, smirking. "Guess Plan B wasn't needed after all." Fizwick laughed, watching their handiwork unfold. "Well, Drax, there's always time for Plan B later. For now, let's enjoy the show." As the alien systems began to implode, Fizwick, Char, and Drax retreated through the portal, back to the safety or relative safety of the euphoric lemming. Vec sat at her station, her eyes wide with curiosity. "How'd it go?" Vec asked, cracking her knuckles like she was ready to dive into the action. Fizwick clapped his hands together. "Smooth as a greased-up weasel at a slip-and-slide convention. Char's virus is turning their systems into cosmic spaghetti." Char's voice came through, smug satisfaction evident. "Sometimes, low-tech solutions are the best tech solutions." Fizwick, Char, and Drax stepped back onto the euphoric lemming, the ship's usual chaos replaced by an eerie silence. It was the kind of silence you'd expect in a graveyard, or perhaps a library full of sleeping librarians, both equally terrifying in their own right. "Guess we showed them," Fizwick said, brushing invisible dust from his shoulder like a captain who just conquered the universe with nothing but a grin and a packet of digital lies. Vec raised an eyebrow, twirling a stylus between her fingers. "Yeah, about that. I kept an eye on the systems while you were off charming the blob. Their signals, still going strong. If anything, they are stronger. Like Jim Bro after New Year's resolution stronger." Char, who was still riding the high of digital warfare, frowned. "That's not great. My virus was supposed to wreak havoc, not turbocharge their systems." Fizwick leaned against the console, which buzzed in a comforting, albeit slightly alarming, way. "So, instead of slowing them down, we've hit the bloody nitro switch. Looks like it," Vec said, with the nonchalance of someone discussing the weather, albeit the kind where flaming meteors rained from the sky. Drax folded his arms, his expression as unreadable as a novel in a forgotten language. "So, Plan B," Fizwick let out a dramatic sigh. "Let's not be too hasty. We've hit a snag, sure, but remember, snags are just opportunities in disguise." Char snorted. "Yeah, what's this one disguised as? A bloody asteroid?" Vec started typing furiously, her eyes glued to the screen. Okay. Let's think this through. Their systems are glitching, right? A bit like our ship when it decides it's had enough of our nonsense." Char brightened slightly, caught in the spark of an idea. "If they are glitching, maybe we can exploit that. You know how on Earth people used to fix things by hitting them really hard? Maybe we can give their systems a good thump." Fizwick finished, grinning like a shark in a kiddie pool. "I like where this is going." The ship's lights flickered, an indicator that the euphoric lemming was in agreement, or maybe it was just being its usual cantankerous self. Drax tilted his head ever so slightly, the universal sign of explain or I start swinging. "What do you mean by exploit?" Vec leaned back, her chair squeaking in protest. "There's a chance those glitches are causing feedback loops. If we can amplify those, maybe we can cause their whole setup to implode. Like a star collapsing in on itself, only messier and much more satisfying." Fizwick clapped his hands together. "All right, team. Let's cause a cosmic calamity. Char, you're on code duty. Vec, keep an eye on their signals. Drax, you're with me on damage control. Let's make sure the lemming doesn't decide to join them in a fiery dance of doom." Char was already knee-deep in code, fingers dancing over the console like a caffeinated spider. "I'll see what I can do, but no promises. Alien tech isn't exactly user-friendly. More like user-hostile." Fizwick turned to Drax, nodding towards the window where the digitization process was visibly accelerating despite, or perhaps because of, their interference. "Think we can keep this rust bucket in one piece?" Drax gave a rare smile, sharp as a knife. "If it falls apart, We'll just have to hold it together with sheer spite. Spite's always been our best glue, Fizwick agreed, patting the wall affectionately as if the ship were an old dog that occasionally bit him but mostly just napped. As Char worked her digital magic, the ship vibrated with the tension of a tuning fork. Fizwick paced, a lion in his tiny, metallic domain, eyeing every crackle and flicker with suspicion. "How we doing, Char?" "Oh, Char replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just trying to convince alien technology to have a nervous breakdown. Shouldn't take long." The main console screen, previously a cascade of comforting blues and greens, now looked like a drunken rainbow threw up. Numbers and symbols scrolled faster than Fizwick could make sense of them, which was probably for the best. "We're getting interference," Vec called out, her voice cutting through the ship's ambient hum. "More signals coming in and not the friendly, let's have tea kind," Fizwick groaned. "Great. Just what we needed. More company." Drax shifted his stance, preparing for whatever might happen next, whether that be combat or karaoke, both equally likely with this crew. Char looked up from her screen, her expression a mixture of excitement and worry. "Okay, I think I've found a way to exploit their glitches. But it's risky. Like, end with your guts on the outside risky." Fizwick rubbed his hands together, a gleam in his eyes. "Risky's just another word for Tuesday around here." "What's the play?" "I can create a feedback loop using their own communication signals," Char explained, composing herself for the technical breakdown. "If it works, it'll cause a chain reaction that could crash their entire system. And if it doesn't," Drax asked, ever the realist, "then we'll be standing in a very pretty explosion," Char said with a wry smile. Fizwick nodded. "Sounds like a plan. Let's roll the dice." "Vec, keep us posted on any changes." "Drax, brace yourself for impact." Char lighted up. The atmosphere on the ship was electric, though whether that was from the crew's energy or the alien interference was anyone's guess. The euphoric lemming felt alive, as if it too was ready to throw caution, and possibly itself, to the wind. "Activating the loop now," Char announced, fingers flying over the console in a final flurry. There was a pause, a deep breath held by the universe itself, and then the ship shuddered violently, as if it was laughing or choking. Fizwick staggered, grabbing hold of the nearest stable surface, which unfortunately happened to be Drax. "How's it looking, Vec?" Not to alarm anyone, but their systems are going haywire," Vec reported, eyes wide with both terror and glee. "But the signals are still increasing. It's like they're feeding off the chaos." "Bloody hell," Fizwick muttered, righting himself. "We've gone and given them a power-up." Drax steadied him, voice calm. "Plan B?" Fizwick nodded, his grin only slightly manic. "Plan B it is." As the ship groaned under the strain, the crew braced themselves for whatever came next. The lights flickered, the consoles beeped frantically, and somewhere deep in the heart of the euphoric lemming something popped ominously. "Char, get ready to use every nasty trick in the book." "Vec, start scanning for escape vectors." "Drax, you're with me. We'll see if we can't convince Glorpox to take a hike." Char didn't pause in her work, her focus razor-sharp. "On it. We'll give them a virus so bad they'll need a digital exorcism." Vec was already working, her fingers moving faster than the eye could track. "I'm on it. Finding us a way out. No promises we won't end up in the middle of a star, though." Drax simply nodded, his presence a steady rock amidst the chaos. The air shimmered once more, and Glorpox reappeared on the holoscreen, its form more erratic than before, colors shifting like a cosmic kaleidoscope having a midlife crisis. "Your interference is futile," it intoned, though its voice was less certain than before. "You will be digitized." "Look, Glorpox," Fizwick began, spreading his arms as if trying to embrace the entire mess they'd made. "I know we've had our differences, but maybe it's time we call it a day, yeah? Surely there's another ship out there just aching to be turned into file folders." Glorpox's form shuddered, its edges blurring. "You do not understand. Our mission is preserve." Yeah, we got that," Fizwick interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. "But maybe preservation's overrated. Ever tried just, I don't know, letting things be?" As the alien envoy struggled to maintain its coherence, The ship around them began to stabilize, the lights returning to a steady glow. A hopeful sign, or maybe just the calm before the storm. "Char, how's Plan C coming?" Fizwick asked, not taking his eyes off the screen. "Plan C? You mean the one where we pray to every deity in existence?" Char replied, tapping furiously at her console. "Yeah, that one," Fizwick said, his voice a mix of sarcasm and genuine hope. Vec interrupted, her voice steady despite the tension. "I've got a route. Not pretty, but it should get us out of this mess." "Great. Let's take it before Glorpox here decides to rearrange our atoms." Fizwick turned to the screen, giving Glorpox a final nod. "It's been fun, but we've got a universe to see. Best of luck with your digital utopia." As the ship lurched into motion, the screen flickered, Glorpox's form finally succumbing to the chaos they'd unleashed. The console beeped one last time, a sound of victory, or maybe just survival. With the euphoric lemming tearing through space, leaving chaos in its wake, the crew settled into the familiar rhythm of crisis averted, at least for now. Fizwick leaned back, a satisfied smirk on his face. "Well, that was a nice bit of excitement, wasn't it?" Char laughed, her fingers finally still. "I'd call it a masterpiece of reckless ingenuity." Vec grinned, eyes sparkling with relief. "And a testament to our ability to make things worse before they get better." Drax simply nodded, the closest he ever came to a full-blown celebration. Fizwick turned back to his crew, the grin never leaving his face. "All right, let's find a place to lay low. Maybe somewhere with a working coffee machine." With a shared chuckle, the crew of the euphoric lemming hurtled into the stars, leaving behind a trail of disrupted signals and an alien race with a severe technological headache. Just another day in the life of the galaxy's most resourceful misfits. Fizwick sprawled in his captain's chair, which looked more like a particularly uncomfortable torture device than a seat of power. He surveyed his motley crew with a glint in his eye, that mix of mischief and mayhem that usually meant someone was about to get hurt. "Well, that went better than expected," he said, a wry grin plastered on his face. Char stretched her arms, cracking her knuckles. "If by better you mean it didn't end with us as space debris, then sure, let's call it a win." Drax leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his customary scowl in place. "So, what's the plan, genius? The digitizers aren't just gonna roll over and let us fly off into the sunset." Fizwick tapped his temple. "Glad you asked, my skeptical friend. Turns out, our gelatinous buddy Glorpox might not be entirely on board with the whole turn everything into digital soup agenda." Vec raised an eyebrow, her stylus tapping a rhythm on her console. "You're saying the alien jello has a conscience, more like a malfunctioning directive," Fizwick clarified. "Seems Glorpox's programming is a bit, shall we say, conflicted. Not every digit wants their binary future." Char leaned forward, intrigued. "And how do you propose we use that to our advantage without getting digitized in the process?" "Simple," Fizwick replied, with the confidence of a gambler about to lose everything. "We convince Glorpox to help us get into their mainframe. We might just be able to crash their entire system from the inside." Drax snorted. "You mean march right into the lion's den and hope the lion's on a diet?" Fizwick shrugged. "Exactly. Besides, it's not every day you get to walk into Alien Central Command. Think of the bragging rights." Vec, her eyes still glued to the screen, sighed. "And what about their security measures? Last I checked, they didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat. They're not just going to let us waltz in, you're right. But we've got the element of surprise and a potential inside man, or blob in our case," Fizwick said. "At best, a half-aligned blob," Char quipped, already considering the digital gymnastics required to pull this off. "I'll need to work on some serious obfuscation codes. We're talking next-level trickery, and I'll see if I can keep the ship from falling apart under pressure," Vec added, turning back to her console with the resigned air of someone who knew her love for machines was a one-sided affair. Drax pushed off the wall, cracking his knuckles in a way that made everyone else slightly uncomfortable. "Guess that leaves me in charge of making sure we don't all get killed, see?" Everyone's got a part to play, Fizwick said, waving his hands like a conductor leading an orchestra of impending doom. Now, let's get in touch with our gooey friend and see where his loyalties truly lie. Contacting Glorpox was about as straightforward as asking a black hole for directions. The console flickered, casting erratic shadows across the crew as the alien envoy's form materialized on the screen, still as colorful and unsettling as a tie-dye shirt on acid. Captain Fizwick, Glorpox intoned, its voice as smooth as oil on water. I sense you have survived your reckless endeavor. Fizwick smirked. Yeah, well, never underestimate the power of sheer dumb luck. Listen, Glorpox, we've got a proposition for you. The gelatinous figure wobbled, its colors shifting in a hypnotic dance. You wish to bargain with the digitizers. Futile. Not exactly a bargain, Fizwick replied, leaning forward with an air of conspiratorial charm. More of a mutual opportunity. We know your programming's not completely on board with the whole digitize everything that moves SH stick. Glorpox's form shimmered, as if in thought. Explain. We help you disrupt their system from the inside. Char cut in, taking over with the precision of a chess player preempting a checkmate. You get a little freedom from the hive mind, we get our fleshy bits intact. Drax crossed his arms, watching the exchange with the critical eye of a man who trusted nothing that wiggled. And maybe you help us get closer to your mainframe, Glorpox hesitated, its form glitching slightly, a digital stutter that spoke volumes. Such an alliance would be unprecedented, sure. Insane. Definitely, Fizwick said, unable to resist a chuckle. But think about it, Glorpox. You've got a chance to be more than just another cog in the machine, a shot at something new. The alien envoy's colors settled into a steady blue, a sign that perhaps they were getting somewhere. This alliance will require trust, a commodity not easily given. We're not exactly rolling in it either, Vex said dryly. She swiveled her chair to face the screen, her stylus twirling with practiced ease. But desperate times and all that. The ship's intercom crackled, a faint reminder of the chaos they'd just evaded. It was a sound everyone had grown to associate with impending doom or another one of Fizwick's crazy ideas. In this case, it was both. All right, Glorpox, Fizwick said, his tone shifting from playful to pragmatic. We need access to your mainframe's periphery, and we need it fast. What do you say? Ready to stretch those pseudo-legs, Glorpox's form flickered once more before stabilizing. I will assist. But know this. The digitizers will not hesitate to eliminate threats, internal or otherwise. That's the spirit, Fizwick replied, clapping his hands together. Let's make some history. With a plan half-formed and their odds not looking much better than a snowball's chance in a supernova, the crew set to work. Char dove into the coding conundrum, fingers flying over the console as if trying to type her way out of a paper bag. Vec monitored the ship systems, ensuring their trusty vessel didn't decide to implode in solidarity with their mission. Drax kept an eye on the ship's exterior, ready to fend off any uninvited guests. Fizwick took a moment to appreciate the quiet chaos, the calculated madness. You know, this might just work, he mused aloud, more to himself than anyone else. The ship lurched as Glorpox initiated the infiltration process, its form becoming more solid, less spectral, as it integrated with the lemming systems. It was like watching a particularly artistic screensaver come to life. Glorpox is in, Vec reported, her voice a mix of skepticism and amazement. Now comes the hard part, Char muttered, focusing on the task at hand. We need to keep our presence masked while still getting access to their mainframe. Char, if anyone can pull off digital invisibility, it's you, Fizwick said, trying to inject some confidence into the rapidly escalating situation. Flattery won't save us, but thanks for the vote of confidence, she replied, smirking despite the tension. As the euphoric lemming hurtled toward the heart of the digitizer's mainframe, the ship groaned under the strain, a harsh reminder of their precarious position in the universe. The familiar hum of the engines was replaced by an unsettling silence, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "You know," Drax said, breaking the silence with his usual candor. "If this doesn't work, at least we'll go out with a hell of a story." Fizwick laughed, the sound carrying a touch of madness that was all too fitting for their current predicament. "With any luck, we'll live to tell it." The lights dimmed, a warning of the increased pressure on their systems. Fizwick, unperturbed, tapped the console with a manicured finger, addressing Glorpox. "How's it looking on your end?" "Progressing," Glorpox replied, its tone mechanical yet tinged with something akin to determination. "Accessing deeper layers of the mainframe. Security is formidable, formidable, huh?" Char echoed, rolling her eyes. "That's one way to put it." Minutes stretched into eternities as the crew worked in synchrony, each playing their part in the high-stakes game they'd chosen to join. The alien entity's assistance was invaluable, but as Glorpox had hinted, trust was a delicate balance, one that could tip in an instant. "Security breach detected," Vec announced, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "They're onto us." "Lovely," Fizwick said, more amused than alarmed. "Time to double down, folks." While Char doubled her efforts to mask their digital footprints, Drax prepared for the inevitable onslaught. He was a man of action, not words, and his determination was palpable. "Glorpox, anything you can do to slow them down?" Fizwick asked, fingers tapping a nervous tattoo on the armrest. "Diverting resources," Glorpox replied, its form shifting as it worked. "But they will adapt." "Good thing we're known for our improvisation," Fizwick said with a grin. "Char, how's our evasiveness looking?" "Like a shadow at a rave," she replied, her focus unbroken. "But I've got a few tricks left," Vec added, "and I've got a couple of backup plans for backup plans. Just in case." "Always the optimist," Fizwick said, his voice light despite the gravity of their situation. "I love it." Outside, the universe moved on, indifferent to the drama unfolding aboard the euphoric lemming. Stars twinkled, planets spun, and somewhere distant galaxies were born and died, all unaware of the small crew challenging an alien monolith. "Captain," Glorpox's voice broke the silence, "I have accessed the mainframe's defenses. I can create a backdoor for your infiltration." Fizwick's smile broadened. "Now that's what I like to hear." "Vec, get ready to steer us through." "On it," Vec replied, her hands dancing over the controls. Drax, ever the pragmatist, looked at Fizwick. "And if this all goes sideways," Fizwick shrugged, his demeanor as casual as ever, "then we'll go down swinging like proper idiots." The ship shuddered as Glorpox initiated the final phase of their infiltration. Fizwick and his crew held their collective breath, bracing for impact, both literal and metaphorical. "All right, people," Fizwick said, his voice echoing with all the bravado he could muster. "Let's make history or become it." In that moment, the euphoric lemming was more than just a ship. It was a testament to human audacity, a declaration that sometimes the reckless pursuit of survival was its own kind of heroism. And so they plunged headfirst into the fray, a tiny speck of chaos in an otherwise orderly universe, daring to defy the odds. The euphoric lemming, usually a cacophony of barely organized chaos, had reached a zenith of silence so profound it was practically mocking them. The ship's system strained like an overworked mule, groaning as Glorpox interfaced deeper into the digitizer's mainframe. It felt like waiting for a punchline that might never come. Char's fingers danced across the console, her expression one of grim determination mingled with a hint of, "Why the hell am I here again?" Vec kept her eyes glued to the flickering holographic display, the stylus twirling in her fingers like a baton for a parade nobody wanted to attend. Drax lurked, arms crossed, his frown etched like a sculptor had chiseled it from stone, if the stone were particularly displeased to be sculpted. Fizwick, naturally, was in his element. The captain leaned back in his chair, the picture of relaxed insanity, legs crossed like a man lounging on a Caribbean beach, rather than one at the helm of impending digital demise. "So, who wants to place bets on how fast this goes sideways?" "You're the betting type, huh?" Drax grumbled. "I'd rather put my money on a dead horse than our odds right now." Fizwick chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that matched the crackle of the ship's failing intercom. A dead horse might actually be more useful at this rate. Char didn't look up from her console. Can we skip the gallows humor until we're not standing on the gallows, maybe? Too late, Vex said, her voice a flat monotone as numbers and symbols spun across her screen. We're already on the guest list. Fizwick was about to reply, likely with another one-liner heavier than a neutron star, when the ship shuddered violently. Everyone grabbed hold of whatever was nearest as the lights flickered, casting the bridge into a strobe-lit ghost story. Security breach, Vec announced, her voice calm yet carrying the weight of "we're so screwed." Her hands flew over the controls, trying to keep the ship's systems from throwing in the towel. The digitizers have found us. They're bringing friends. Lovely, Fizwick said, clapping his hands like they were about to start a game of charades. Roll out the welcome mat, Drax. Already on it, Drax said, moving to the weapons console. Though I doubt they'll appreciate the fireworks. As if on cue, the ship's sensors blared, alerting them to the myriad of hostile signals homing in. On the screen, alien vessels blipped into the edges of their radar, like sharks circling a particularly clueless school of fish. This is getting cozy, Char muttered, her focus unbroken. Fizwick watched the alien blips multiply. Well, I've always been a fan of crowds, just not the ones that want to digitize me. Glorpox's holographic form flickered, its colors dimming like a disco ball losing power. They are reinforcing security. My access is compromised, Drax snorted. That's one way to say we're screwed. I prefer enthusiastically challenged, Fizwick quipped, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of genuine concern. Char let out a slow breath, her fingers slowing as she assessed the situation. We need options, Fizwick. Preferably ones that don't end with us in a database. Working on it, Fizwick said, though what exactly he was working on remained a mystery to everyone, including himself. If we can just draw them away by some time. By time with what? Drax interrupted, arms crossed again. Our charming personalities. No, with explosive decompression, Vex suggested deadpan. Could be quite a show. Before anyone else could contribute more witty yet ultimately useless ideas, the ship rocked again, this time with a more persistent attention-grabbing urgency. The kind that screamed, "Pay attention or else." Shields failing, Vec announced, sounding like she was reading the inevitable conclusion of a particularly boring novel. We can't take much more. Fizwick leaned forward, the weight of command settling onto his shoulders like a lead cape. Glorpox, any last-minute heroics up your, whatever you have instead of sleeves. Diverting all possible resources, Glorpox replied, its form glitching as it struggled against the digitizer's defenses. But they adapt quickly. Yeah, they're like space cockroaches, Char observed, her voice tinged with frustration. Just when you think they're gone, boom, more of them. Fizwick's mind raced, ideas and scenarios playing out like a particularly grim holo movie. We need a diversion, something big enough to pull their attention. Something like us blowing up, Vex suggested, her voice tight with dark humor. Preferably not, Fizwick said, but close enough to make them sweat. Assuming they sweat, Drax grumbled. Char glanced up, a spark of inspiration in her eyes. We could overload the sensors, make it look like we're everywhere at once. Might buy us a few minutes. Or just enough time to get our asses handed to us, Drax said. But it's a plan. Fizwick shrugged. Wouldn't be the first time. He flashed a grin, though it was more bravado than genuine confidence. All right, let's give them something to remember us by. With Glorpox's help, they set to work. The ship became a hive of activity, each crew member executing their part with the precision of a chaotic symphony. Char tied their systems into knots, creating phantom signals that darted around the digitizer's radar like fireflies on a death wish. Signals are live, Vec reported, her eyes never leaving the holographic display. They are reacting, but we've got maybe minutes. Good enough, Fizwick said, his voice carrying a resigned determination. Char, Drax, Vec, get us ready to move. Glorpox, keep their attention on those ghosts. What do you think I'm doing? Glorpox replied, its digital voice tinged with the most alien approximation of sarcasm. They all knew it was a Hail Mary, a last-ditch attempt with odds about as favorable as tossing a grenade into a black hole and hoping for fireworks instead of a funeral. But it was all they had. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity squeezed into a moment. The ship shuddered, systems straining under the pressure, alarms blaring a symphony of impending doom. Char muttered under her breath, her focus never wavering. "This is not how I imagined going out." Fizwick chuckled, though it was more bitter than amused. "How did you imagine it?" "Not as Data, that's for sure." Drax snorted. "I figured I'd die old and disgruntled. Guess I'm getting 1 out of 2. Optimism is key," Vex said, her voice wry. "Even if it's about your own demise." The alien vessels were closing in, their presence an oppressive weight pressing down on them all. The euphoric lemming systems groaned, a mechanical symphony of defiance against the inevitable. Glorpox flickered, its form fading as it poured all it had into the deception. "They are responding, but the mainframe is aware," Fizwick nodded. "Then let's not waste it. Drax, weapons ready. Char, set the jump coordinates. Vec, keep us from falling apart." "Sure, no pressure," Vec replied, her tone as dry as a desert wind. The ship lurched as they surged forward, the engines howling like a banshee let loose from hell's own chorus. Fizwick held onto his command chair, a grin tugging at his lips despite the odds. "Let's show them what the euphoric lemming can do." The crew worked with frenetic precision, hands moving faster than thought, each action a dance against destiny's grim choreography. They were a heartbeat away from the abyss, yet they moved with a defiance that dared the universe to blink. As the ship blazed through space, the alien vessels closed in, their presence a dark shadow looming over the lemmings' desperate flight. The sensor ghosts flickered, moments away from being blown apart by reality. "Ready for jump," Char called out, her voice tight with the urgency of their plight. "Do it," Fizwick ordered, his tone brooking no argument. The ship shuddered as they burst into the FTL corridor, the stars stretching into lines of light, a kaleidoscope of potential futures bleeding into one. The alien signals began to fade, the tension easing as they left their pursuers behind. For a moment, just a heartbeat, the crew allowed themselves to breathe, to cling to the fragile hope that they'd outpace the storm. Then the ship shuddered again, this time with the sickening finality of something snapping. The lights dimmed, systems faltering as if finally succumbing to the relentless pursuit. Fizwick gritted his teeth, clinging to the chair as the ship groaned around them. "What's happening?" "Main engines failing," Vec reported, her voice laced with tension. Massive energy surge detected. Char's console flared, the readings a chaotic mess of data that spelled disaster. "We're not going to make it. The FTL drive's overloading." Drax's expression was grim, yet there was a flicker of stubborn resilience. "Looks like we're going down after all." Fizwick let out a breath, a mix of resignation and determination. "Then let's do it our way." As the ship hurtled toward its uncertain fate, the crew of the euphoric lemming faced their darkest moment, surrounded by an overwhelming adversary. And yet, in the face of annihilation, they remained defiant, a testament to human audacity even in the jaws of inevitable defeat. "Hold onto your hats," Fizwick said, his voice carrying the bravado of a man who refused to go quietly. "Let's make it a ride to remember." With those words they plunged into the unknown, their fate uncertain, but their spirits unbroken. The euphoric lemming bucked and screamed through the FTL corridor like a cat being force-fed a bath. The engines belched out warning signals, red lights painting the bridge in hues of impending doom. Fizwick held onto his chair, bracing for yet another bad turn in the cosmic comedy of errors that was their lives. "Well, at least we're consistent," he observed, gritting his teeth as the ship shuddered. "Always on the brink of disaster." "Consistency is underrated," Vec replied, her hand clutching the flickering holographic console like a lifeline. The display danced with chaos, alien signals nipping at their heels. Char shot a glance at Fizwick, her usual grim focus softened by a dash of curiosity. "What's the plan, Captain? Besides hoping we don't explode before breakfast?" Fizwick scanned the dimly lit bridge, thoughts churning through his mind like a blender filled with nuts and bolts. They needed a win, something unexpected. And then his eyes landed on an ancient relic tucked between more critical systems, an old, dusty hard drive labeled Earth Archives. "What do you say we throw him a curveball?" He grinned, the kind of grin that promised nothing good and everything interesting. Drax raised an eyebrow, skepticism practically tattooed on his forehead. "You're not suggesting we throw old movies at them, are you?" "Not movies, Drax," Fizwick said, his grin widening. "Comedy, the best weapon in our arsenal." "Comedy?" Char said, sounding like she'd just been asked to believe in the Tooth Fairy. "Out here, against them." Fizwick tapped the Earth Archives drive, dust puffing off it like a disgruntled ghost. "You'd be amazed what a little humor can do." "Confusion is our friend." Vec raised her stylus, twirling it with a flourish that belied her nervousness. "And what exactly do you propose we do? Tell them a joke?" Fizwick leaned forward. "Why not? Let's show them what real madness looks like. Upload the comedy archive into their systems. Let's see how they handle Monty Python." For a moment, the crew stared at him like he'd just suggested they sing a musical number. Then slowly, Char's lips curled into a smirk. "If we're going down, might as well confuse the hell out of them first." "That's the spirit," Fizwick said, his enthusiasm infectious. "Glorpox, can you make it happen?" Glorpox's holographic form flickered with digital static, a spectral nod of agreement. "I will attempt to interface and transmit the data. Their systems are robust, but not immune to absurdity." "Do it," Fizwick commanded, the weight of their decision hanging like a guillotine over a comedian's head. The ship systems whirred to life, a Frankenstein patchwork of ancient comedy and desperate innovation. Vec manipulated the controls, sending the archive data spiraling out into the void toward their alien pursuers. "Uploading now," Vec announced, fingers dancing over the console. "Let's see if they like British humor." Drax snorted, crossing his arms with a bemused expression. "Wouldn't be surprised if they surrender just to make it stop." Seconds stretched into minutes, each tick of time pregnant with potential victory or catastrophic failure. The alien signals wavered, fluctuating like static on a half-tuned radio. And then a miracle, or perhaps a cosmic joke, occurred. The alien vessels faltered, their movements erratic. The digitizers, it seemed, were struggling with an unexpected new adversary, the peculiar absurdity of Earth's finest comedy. Fizwick let out a laugh, a genuine, deep-bellied laugh that reverberated through the bridge. "Looks like they weren't ready for the ministry of silly walks." Char shook her head in disbelief, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. "You actually did it, you madman." "Never underestimate the power of a good laugh," Fizwick said, his tone both triumphant and incredulous. Drax uncrossed his arms, a grudging nod of respect aimed at the captain. "Gotta hand it to you, Fizwick. You may be crazy, but you're our kind of crazy." The ship shuddered again, but this time it felt less like doom and more like opportunity. The alien vessels, still fumbling through their digital Monty Python montage, started to retreat, their formations dissolving like an ice cube in a volcano. "We're clear," Vec reported, her voice tinged with a mix of disbelief and admiration. "They're falling back." Fizwick leaned back in his chair, the weight of their escape easing the usual tension in his shoulders. "Let's not give them a second chance." "Char, plot us a course out of here." Char nodded, fingers flying over her console with renewed vigor. "Coordinates set, ready for jump." "Engage," Fizwick ordered, the word a lifeline to sanity in the midst of chaos. The euphoric lemming leapt forward, tearing through the fabric of space with a newfound confidence. The ship hummed beneath their feet, an engine of defiance propelling them toward a future they dared to seize. As the stars blurred into lines once more, the bridge settled into a quiet punctuated by the occasional crackle of the intercom. Fizwick allowed himself a moment of reflection, considering the madness of their journey and the even greater insanity they'd just unleashed. Never thought comedy would save our skins, Drax mused, voice low but full of grudging respect. Fizwick chuckled, the sound a balm to his frayed nerves. Neither did I, but it seems even the universe isn't immune to a good punchline. Glorpox flickered back into clearer focus, its digital form stabilizing. The digitizers are still adapting, but our window of opportunity remains open for now. Char looked at Fizwick, her expression a mix of admiration and weary amusement. What's next, Captain? Another archive of jokes? Maybe some slapstick. Fizwick shook his head, the reality of their situation reasserting itself. No, we've got to move forward, keep them guessing, keep them off balance. Vec leaned back in her seat, the stylus twirling with a newfound ease. And maybe next time bring some popcorn for the encore. The crew allowed themselves a moment of levity, the laughter a bridge between despair and hope. They'd turn the tide, if only for a moment, and the future, uncertain as it was, seemed just a bit brighter. Fizwick looked around at his crew, the people who'd stood by him through thick and thin, madness and sanity. Whatever comes next, he said, voice steady, we face it together. Drax grunted, a rare smile breaking through his usual gruff exterior. Together. Even if it means more comedy. Char nodded, her determination undimmed by their narrow escape. And maybe next time we show them the Three Stooges. Vec chuckled, the sound a balm to the bridge's usual tension. Or maybe some old cartoons. Aliens won't know what hit them. Fizwick grinned, the weight of command settling comfortably on his shoulders. Let's keep the surprises coming, team. We've got a universe to confuse. With those words, the euphoric lemming sailed on, a beacon of defiant insanity in the vastness of space. Their journey was far from over, but they'd snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, wielding laughter as their weapon of choice. And for now, that was enough. As the stars streaked by, the bridge of the euphoric lemming resonated with a rare sense of camaraderie, a shared understanding that they'd accomplished the impossible. They'd faced down an enemy that seemed unbeatable and emerged not just alive, but victorious in the most unexpected way. Fizwick reclined in his chair, watching the cosmos unfold before them. The silence was no longer oppressive, but rather a comforting reminder of their shared experience. They were still alive, still fighting, and they'd done it with a bit of humor and a lot of audacity. Glorpox's holographic form flickered one last time, its digital voice carrying a note of respect. Your ingenuity is surprising. The digitizers will not forget this encounter. We'll make sure they don't, Fizwick replied, his tone both confident and deeply amused. After all, who knew the key to survival was laughter, comedy at the end of the universe? Vec mused, her fingers gently tapping the console. Who would have thought? Us, Char chimed in, satisfaction coloring her words. Because we're too damn stubborn to give up. And too damn crazy, Drax added, a chuckle escaping his lips. Fizwick nodded, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his crew, a group bound by madness, humor, and an unwavering will to survive. Let's keep that edge, folks. We've got a universe to explore and plenty more aliens to confuse. With that, the euphoric lemming continued its journey, a testament to human resilience and the power of a well-timed joke. And though the road ahead was fraught with challenges, they faced it with a newfound sense of purpose. Because in the end, humanity's greatest weapon wasn't just technology or strategy. It was the ability to laugh in the face of adversity and turn the impossible into reality. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was enough to change the universe. The euphoric lemming, the ship with a name as misleading as the Titanic, hummed through the vacuum of space like a disgruntled bee. Its crew, who were neither the best nor brightest, had just pulled off a miracle, or a cosmic joke, really, depending on your perspective. Comedy had saved their hides, and if that didn't deserve a chuckle, then nothing did. Captain Fizwick, a man whose plans usually teetered somewhere between genius and madness, sat comfortably in his chair. The bridge, typically a cacophony of chaos, now buzzed with a nervous energy and the occasional burst of laughter. The crew celebrated their narrow escape, But like anything that felt too good to be true, unease lingered in the air like a bad smell that refused to clear out. "All right, everyone," Fizwick said, breaking the transient peace with his gravelly voice. "Let's not get too cozy. We might have given the digitizers a brain freeze, but they're not the only ones out here." Char, ever the grim realist, shot him a look that could cut steel. "Yeah, Captain, because nothing says we're still in danger like an alien race trying to turn us into data because they can't handle sarcasm." Drax, the crew's poster child for skepticism, grunted in agreement. "If comedy's our best defense, we might need a new career path." Fizwick leaned back, steepling his fingers. "True, but let's face it, whatever comes next can't be worse than watching them fall apart because they couldn't handle a good silly walk." Glorpox, the rather spectral embodiment of conflicting priorities, flickered into view. The alien envoy, or ex-envoy depending on the ire, embraced its inner Schrodinger's cat, existing somewhere between ally and liability. At this moment, it seemed more inclined to help, or at least less inclined to harm. "I have intercepted communications from the digitizers," Glorpox announced, its voice an odd blend of robotic monotone and the dissonant impatience of a teenager forced to be civil at a family dinner. "They are perturbed and adapting, but a truce may be proposed." Fizwick raised an eyebrow. "A truce? Because of Monty Python?" Vec, who was twirling her stylus like a magician, looked up. "Guess nobody told them that laughter's the best medicine, or the best weapon, apparently. Their systems are processing the anomalies," Glorpox continued, a faint digital twitch betraying its own bemusement or perhaps indigestion. "They are considering alternatives to digitization." "Alternatives?" Char questioned, her tone skeptical enough to turn milk sour. "Like what?" "Stand-up comedy instead of assimilation. Negotiation, perhaps," Glorpox replied. "Your humor has destabilized their protocols. They are seeking unconventional alliances." Fizwick rubbed his chin, which was always a sign that he was either thinking deeply or had an itch he couldn't reach. "All right, let's say we play along. What's their offer besides not turning us into data popsicles?" Glorpox's holographic form pulsed as it processed the question. "They propose a cessation of hostility in exchange for further cultural exchanges." Drax let out a snort. "So, they want more jokes." "Precisely," Glorpox confirmed. "Your Earth's comedy is unique. They believe it may enhance their understanding of organic unpredictability." Fizwick stood, pacing the bridge like a caged tiger, or maybe just a man who had too much coffee. "And if we refuse?" "They will adapt," Glorpox said, with the kind of finality that suggested adapting wasn't just an option but a certainty. "Guess we found their Achilles heel," Vec remarked, her stylus a blur in her fingers. "Who knew it was slapstick?" Char, ever the pessimist, crossed her arms. "What's the catch? There's always a catch." "They will require participation in a demonstration," Glorpox said, flickering ominously. Fizwick's eyes narrowed. "A demonstration of humor," Glorpox clarified. "They seek to understand its effects firsthand." Silence fell over the bridge, only broken by the background hum of the ship systems. A dozen thoughts seemed to cross Fizwick's mind, each more absurd than the last. Drax was the first to voice what they were all thinking. "You're telling me they want us to perform a comedy show?" "Correct," Glorpox confirmed, apparently unaware of or indifferent to the absurdity of the request. Fizwick chuckled, a sound that seemed to carry equal parts amusement and dread. "All right, team, looks like we're comedians now. Let's give them a show they'll never forget." Vec set the stylus down, looking around at her crewmates with an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "This is either the best idea we've ever had or the stupidest." Char sighed, the sound filled with the resignation of a woman far too familiar with the whims of fate. "And here I thought we'd get through the day without a new kind of crazy." "Crazy's what we do best," Fizwick said, a grin spreading across his face. "Let's show them how it's done." The crew, a mismatched collection of misfits and maniacs, prepared for what might be the most bizarre performance of their lives. They'd faced down death and disaster, but this was something new. something that involved a stage, metaphorical or otherwise, and the expectation of laughter. Glorpox hovered nearby, a digital specter of optimism blended with skepticism. "I will assist in facilitating the connection," it offered, perhaps more out of curiosity than duty. As preparations began, Drax leaned over to Char with a smirk. "Bet you never thought saving the universe would involve telling jokes to a bunch of aliens." "Never say never," Char replied, her voice rich with sarcasm. "Though I might have signed up for the wrong job." Vec chuckled, her fingers dancing over the console. "Let's just hope they're not expecting Shakespeare. They're gonna get more Three Stooges than Hamlet." Fizwick clapped his hands together, his eyes sparkling with a mix of mischief and madness that was all too familiar. "All right, folks, let's make 'em laugh. And if that doesn't work, at least we'll go out with style." The ship's comms crackled to life, the half-fried system barely holding together under the strain. But it would do. It had to. There was no room for failure in a plan this harebrained. It either worked or they were digital dust. As Glorpox made the final adjustments, Fizwick took a deep breath. "All right, Glorpox, let's open the channel." The holographic console flared to life, the alien signals pulsing through the ship like an electric current. A countdown began, numbers flashing across their screens, ticking toward a moment none of them truly understood. And then, with a flick of a switch and an ironic twist of fate, the euphoric lemming found itself broadcasting to an audience of digitizers. An audience that had come expecting a fight, and instead found themselves seated front row at the universe's most unexpected comedy club. Fizwick cleared his throat, stepping forward with an air of confidence that belied the absurdity of the situation. "Greetings, digitizers. We hear you're in the market for a bit of humor." The response was immediate, a chorus of alien tones reverberating through the ship. Glorpox translated, its words a blend of curiosity and caution. "They are intrigued." Drax, never one to miss a chance for a quip, leaned in. "Great. We've got their attention. Now we just have to keep it." Fizwick grinned, a touch of madness in his expression. "Then let's give them something to remember." As the crew of the euphoric lemming launched into their impromptu performance, the universe seemed to hold its breath. It was a display of human ingenuity, creativity, and sheer stubbornness, a refusal to be beaten by anything, even the most absurd challenges. Char, Vec, Drax, and even Glorpox joined in, the bridge a chaotic whirlwind of jokes, physical comedy, and everything in between. The digitizers, for their part, watched with rapt attention, their systems processing each punchline, each pratfall, with a mix of confusion and revelation. And then, as the final joke landed, a particularly ridiculous bit involving a banana peel and an unfortunate slip, the digitizers reacted. It was not with hostility or indifference, but with something entirely unexpected. Laughter. A sound that resonated through the ship, a cacophony of alien mirth that seemed to shake the very fabric of their reality. The digitizers, it seemed, had found something they hadn't known they were seeking. A connection, a shared experience that transcended the barriers of alien and human. Fizwick and his crew stood stunned, their expressions a mix of disbelief and elation. They had done it. They had bridged the chasm of difference with a joke, turned the tide of conflict with comedy. As the laughter subsided, Glorpox relayed the digitizer's response, its voice tinged with a hint of awe. They wish to negotiate, to find a new path forward." Fizwick nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "Then let's talk, and maybe, just maybe, we'll all learn something new." The euphoric lemming, a ship of misfits and miracle workers, had once again defied the odds. And as they set forth on this new journey of understanding, one thing was certain. They'd never underestimate the power of a good joke again. The crew shared a glance, a silent acknowledgement of their shared insanity and the bond forged in the fires of absurdity. They'd become something more than a crew, they'd become a family. And as the stars streaked by, the ship sailed on, its path uncertain but its purpose clear. They had a universe to explore and an endless supply of surprises to share. Fizwick looked around at his crew, his voice carrying the weight of leadership and the lightness of newfound hope. "Let's keep them guessing, team. We've got a universe to entertain." And with that, the euphoric lemming continued its journey, a testament to the power of laughter and the indomitable spirit of humanity. They were still far from safe, far from certain, but they'd found a way forward together, with humor as their guide. And for now, in the vastness of space, that was more than enough. The bridge of the euphoric lemming was a testament to the resilience of duct tape and hope. Systems were still fried, the air smelled faintly of burnt circuits, and the crew was deep into the post-adrenaline slump that followed their impromptu comedy show. Fizwick, the captain, with the perpetual look of a man who'd accidentally swallowed a bug, surveyed the scene with satisfaction. "Well, folks, it looks like we didn't end up as a bunch of ones and zeros," he said, leaning back in his chair with the grace of a man who knew he'd cheated death, but wasn't ready to brag about it. "Guess there's something to be said for the healing power of slapstick." Char, ever the voice of reason, or doom depending on the day, crossed her arms. "Yeah, until they decide they've had enough of our antics and come back with a delete key the size of a moon." "Always the optimist," Drax muttered, poking at a console that looked like it was held together by sheer force of will. "Come on, Char." Maybe they realized humor is the best way to deal with the universe's idiocy, Vec added, or they're just biding their time while they figure out how to laugh us to death. Glorpox hovered in its usual holographic spot, a mixture of glitchy pixels and what might pass for digital cheer. "The digitizers have expressed gratitude for the cultural exchange. They've agreed to withdraw for now." Fizwick chuckled, the sound echoing his relief. "Good. Now all we have to do is get this flying coffin back in shape." The crew set to work. Char wielded a wrench like a weapon, whacking at a particularly stubborn panel. Drax was knee-deep in wiring, mumbling curses that sounded more like prayers. Vec monitored systems with the intensity of a gambler trying to read a poker face on a robot. Fizwick, for his part, supervised with the air of a man who'd much rather be doing anything else. "So," Char said, as she yanked a sparking wire free, "what's the plan once we're not drifting aimlessly in space?" Fizwick shrugged. "Find the nearest port that won't arrest us on sight. Maybe sell a few jokes to some locals." "Who knows? Sounds solid," Drax commented, his voice muffled as he rummaged through a mess of cables. "And here I was hoping for something less suicidal." A sudden burst of static interrupted their conversation as the ship's intercom decided to add its 2 cents. Cracking and fizzing like a soda can being opened in a library, it blared for attention until Vec managed to kick it back into submission. "Guess the intercom still got a sense of humor," she said dryly, twirling her stylus like a weapon of mass distraction. Glorpox glided closer, its holographic form flickering slightly. "My mission here is complete. The digitizers have uploaded their understanding of your culture. I must return to them." Fizwick nodded, a tinge of regret in his voice. "You sure you don't want to stick around? We've got jokes for days and more chaos than you can shake a circuit at." The alien envoy flickered, a semblance of a smile crossing its digital features. "I appreciate the offer, however I must decline. The digitizers require guidance on humor." Drax smirked. "Good luck with that. Just remember, sarcasm is like a second language here." Glorpox's form shimmered one last time, its presence a reminder of alliances formed in the strangest ways. "Farewell, crew of the euphoric lemming. May your path be as unpredictable as your humor." With that, Glorpox vanished, leaving behind empty space and a faint scent of ozone. A moment of silence followed, the crew unsure of how to fill the void left by their quirky companion. "Well," Char said, her voice cutting through the quiet like a knife through cheap butter, "I guess it's back to the grindstone, or whatever passes for one out here." Vec nodded, pulling up diagnostics with a few deft flicks of her stylus. "First order of business, getting the lemming to stop acting like a stubborn mule. Second order," Fizwick added, "figuring out how to convince the next port we dock at that we're not a traveling circus." "Third," Drax chimed in, finding out if they've got a bar that serves something stronger than recycled air. As they worked, the ship gradually began to resemble something functional rather than a scrapyard's fever dream. Panels were reattached, wires reconnected, systems rebooted with the kind of persuasion only a desperate engineer could muster. Fizwick leaned against the console, watching his crew with the pride of a father watching his kids rebuild a toaster. "You know," he said, "if anyone had told me we'd save the universe with a banana peel, I'd have laughed them out of the room." Char snorted, wiping her hands on her grimy overalls. "Just goes to show, the universe has a really weird sense of humor." Drax looked up from his work, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Speaking of which, anyone up for a round of improvised comedy club once we're done?" Vec chuckled, the sound a welcome relief amidst the drudgery of repairs. "Only if you promise not to repeat any jokes. I don't think I can handle another one about a Martian, a Venusian, and an asteroid." As the hours ticked by, the crew fell into a rhythm, their banter a soundtrack to the symphony of clanking metal and humming engines. They'd faced down existential threats, navigated the absurdity of intergalactic diplomacy, and somehow come out the other side with their sanity, mostly, intact. It was the kind of triumph they'd never expected but knew they'd never forget. A reminder that no matter how dire the situation, humor could light the way through the darkest of space. Finally, as the last panel was secured and the last diagnostic completed, the euphoric lemming roared back to life. Systems blinked online, the engines purred like a contented cat, and the ship shuddered with the promise of future misadventures. Fizwick surveyed their handiwork, a grin splitting his face. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got ourselves a spaceship again." For now, Char rolled her eyes, but there was warmth in her gaze. "Let's just hope it stays that way." As they prepared to set off, Drax raised a hand. "Here's to us, to the crew that laughed in the face of danger and made the universe a little less terrifying." The others raised imaginary glasses, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. They were battered, bruised, and maybe a little crazy, but they were together. A family forged in the fires of absurdity, ready to face whatever came next. "All right," Fizwick said, his voice carrying the weight of leadership and the buoyancy of newfound hope. "Let's set a course for anywhere but here. Time to find a place where we can repair more than just the ship." As the stars streaked by, the euphoric lemming began its journey anew, a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity and the power of a well-timed punchline. And in the vast, unknowable expanse of the universe, they knew one thing for certain: they'd never stop laughing. Not as long as there were more adventures to be had and more threats to face with a quip and a smile. Fizwick glanced around at his crew, his voice carrying a grin. "Let's keep them guessing, team. We've got a universe to entertain." Char, Drax, and Vec nodded, their expressions a mix of camaraderie and mischief. "Here's hoping the next crisis comes with a laugh track," Vec said, the stylus twirling once more with renewed vigor. With that, the euphoric lemming surged forward, its path uncertain but filled with infinite potential. A ship and crew bound by humor, folly, and the irrepressible human spirit. And as they sailed into the unknown, their laughter echoed across the stars, a sound that, despite the odds, might just be enough to save the universe.